Episode number 5 of Togetherness Talks. Today I'm here with Erika Chalkey, who teaches women to overcome niceness. She helps women who are too nice. And I'm going to read a little intro to Erika here. So Erika's an international embodiment educator, somatic coach, and mindfulness meditation teacher with over a decade's experience in female empowerment. She's dedicated to helping women break free of niceness so they can step into their own authority, live according to their own rules, and fully share their talents with the world. Erika's helped hundreds of women across the globe gain greater freedom, from ex-untouchable communities in India to executive coaches in New York, neighborhood mums, and at-risk teens to prize-winning authors and creators. I'm really excited to have Erika on the show today, and there's been lots of interest in this talk. So let's bring Erika on. Hello, Erika, welcome.
Hi. Thank you for having me, Adam. It's wonderful to be here.
It's so great to have you here, Erika. Overcoming niceness, Erika, helping women who are too nice. I'm really curious how you got into this. Are you a recovering nice person?
Yeah, absolutely. So I often start my talks by sort of saying, hi, I'm Erika and I'm a woman. And yeah, so gosh, how I got into this is a multifaceted thing, and I feel like we've only got half an hour. But yeah, I guess my background is in human rights. I grew up in a really deprived community and a stigmatized neighborhood. And so I saw sort of inequality around me growing up. And I was always going to be a human rights lawyer. So I went to university on a scholarship, and that was sort of going to be my path to save the world through human rights. The question underneath that being, why do some people's lives matter more than other people's lives? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then this search for kind of freedom, this my deepest held value is for freedom. And alongside that, found Buddhism, and I've been practicing Buddhism for a decade now. And at the heart of Buddhism is sort of freedom, and finding this kind of koan of, to change society, we need to change ourselves, and yet we're not separate from the environments in which we live and grow up, and sort of exploring that. And then my own tangent of niceness through that. So my own conditioning, exploring my own ways in which I'm sort of unfree and bound by my history and my past and generations before me, and seeing this, what I now call niceness, which is like prioritizing other people, feeling I'm less valuable for whatever reason than other people, putting them first, orientating around others, building my sense of identity around others, helping others, saving others, and all of that ending in a huge burnout in my late 20s, and really having to rebuild a life that was more in line with who I actually am, rather than a sort of persona self that I've built up unknowingly. So that's kind of my very quick potted history.
Thanks, Erika. I love how you say persona. I'm really into the work of Gabor Mate, and he talks about these two fundamental needs for attachment and authenticity. And I really find this niceness showing up as a way to help us stay connected to other people, to avoid rejection and the pain of that. And then what we sacrifice, of course, is our authenticity and our truth and our very existence. And that can become very painful when we start realizing that, especially as adults. So what's your fix for overcoming and isn't it interesting, like niceness is it feels like such an English thing, like everyone, you should be a nice person, we should be nice little boys and girls, we should be good. It's interesting that niceness seems quite highly rated in our culture. Do you think we're off track there?
Well, in my work, I really make this distinction between niceness and kindness. Yeah. So, which I find really helpful, and lots of the women I work with find really helpful, because we don't want to, to a degree, being nice is good. Yeah. We want to be pleasant people. We want to be in healthy connection. And sometimes that does mean prioritizing someone else. Sometimes it does mean putting oneself second. But when that's like habitual, unconscious, a coping strategy, like you say, I've for some reason been unable to access my own authority, my own sort of power, the only option I have left is to get my needs met through making sure other people are happy. And then that means adapting my behavior to elicit their happiness, and abandoning myself. When that becomes unconscious, just the way that we have to operate because we don't have another option, that's what I call niceness. And I separate that from kindness, which is I have a choice. Like I know my wishes, I know my desires. I could choose to act a different way, but I choose to come into collaboration with you or prioritize you, or, it's like not, it's got choice in it. There's a freedom there. So that's one helpful kind of reframe, I think, when we're talking about niceness, because in a way, like niceness is, being nice in the way that you described it, isn't necessarily a bad thing. Those are beautiful qualities, receptivity, being able to be sensitive to others, being able to adapt to others. That I'm super adaptive and I wouldn't want to change that, because of the way that I've developed. But it's when it becomes unbalanced, when it becomes sort of untethered from inner connection or a sense of authority, that it tips over, I think, into being unhealthy. And of course, women and in society in general, of course we want, the whole education system is set up for conformity. We want, we want people basically to be conformists. It's much easier to manage a conformist society than a society of free-thinking individuals that have the capacity to act on their own will, And
there's such shame around bringing up an argument or wanting to do something differently, or it's difficult. So this is an interesting point, actually, about men and women. And I notice you work with, is it exclusively with women?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't turn away a man who came to work with me, but my focus is on women, so I work with women, I host women's groups. And yeah, that's not to say I wouldn't make exceptions to that, but that's my main focus because that's my lived experience, that's my history. I feel like in my own authority to talk to that.
Yeah, I really understand that. I'm a recovering people pleaser myself, and as a kid, I actually, when people would ask me, what would you like to do? What would you want for your birthday? Where would you like to go? What film would you like to see? I had no idea.
Yeah.
So this thing of knowing what do I actually want, it's like the desire to fit in and be nice actually eroded my personality.
Yes.
And it's like, the way I can describe, I felt a bit like a ghost. It was very, very painful. So I work in this area as well, and I think it's interesting. It's great you work with women, and I'm curious as to if you see a difference between men and women in the way they handle this niceness or this desire to be accepted and not rejected.
I was thinking about this question before because I knew you were going to ask it, and I honestly don't quite know how to answer it personally. I really want to say that I really relate to your experience. Like, I had a relationship breakup in my late 20s, and the terror of not knowing who I was outside of that relationship, I really remember. I just felt vacant, and that's really like a shared experience of the women I work with. So I'd love to just come back to this in a moment after this question of how we re-find ourselves. But the question, men and women, I mean, in a way, I work with women, and there's definitely I definitely see it as the way that women are raised in our society. We're taught to be obedient, to be small. We're not many generations away from still being property. And some of my friends in other parts of the world, as women, still are property, So I definitely see a female conditioning in particular. And yet, what we're talking about in all of this is sort of access to power and systems of kind of oppression, and they aren't straightforward. They're multidimensional and complex. I mentioned class earlier. Like, I come from a poor, deprived background. That has an impact. There's the race issue. There's sexuality, gender, and that's all in the mix. And so, in a way, people pleasing or niceness is a way of coping with having in some way lost or not had access to our own authority, our own access to power. It's a way of coping. And so I see that affects broad swathes of society in different ways. So of course it affects men, and of course, and at some point we all have to choose between our own authenticity, like you say, and belonging for our caregivers. So,
well,
yeah.
This belonging that we choose, if it's through pleasing others and it's not authentic, it's a kind of fake belonging.
Yeah.
I remember working really hard over a few years to ingratiate myself into this group of people, thinking they were so great, and working really hard and having sensations in my body. This isn't correct. This doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
And only 3 years later, I realized I don't even like these people.
Yes. Yeah.
And I love what you talk about reclaiming this authority and reclaiming this space. And it's, I love this phrase, our sacred bond with ourselves, because it feels like it reaches into this place where we're really honoring ourselves, really honoring our being by respecting our thoughts and feelings and honoring them by feeling them.
Yes. Yeah, totally. So, and that's not straightforward. So just to really speak to that, like, gosh, Adam, I'm really loving how honest you're being, and how, like, I'm sure so many people are relating to what you're saying, that sort of full sense of belonging. So let me speak to that and then come back to it. I've got so much to say. So full sense of belonging, it's like, because we don't know who we are, because we, like you say, are orientating out to what we think other people want. And in order to do that, we're having to deny different aspects of ourselves in order to belong. Then there's always the question, isn't there, of like, well, do I really belong here? Because I don't know if you've ever had that sense of like, if they really knew, or if I really showed up as I truly am, they wouldn't love me. They wouldn't. And it's like, gosh, so we sort of do this thing because we want to belong out here. And yet because we're doing this thing where we're not being our authentic selves, we'll never feel that we belong until we can show up just as we are, and people either accept us or they don't. And we find our true people where we do fit in a community.
It's like we have to find this sense of belonging in ourselves.
Yes. And I feel almost evangelical now about this.
Yeah.
That healthy yang, so healthy yang being the ability to set boundaries, the ability to ask for what we want, the ability to assert ourselves. So that's sort of all the more yang inner masculine qualities, right? They have to come from healthy yin, which is this return journey home. Yeah, it has to come from a healthy inner connection with ourselves, which is the primary thing that gets sort of denied us. Like either we deny ourselves, or this, because we've had to prioritize another person over ourselves, that inner connection has been sort of denied. And there's so many women that I work with, there's this fear of returning back to oneself, because what if there's nothing there? That someone said, like, what if I have no inner life, And it's just like, gosh, we're like this vast inner universe of nourishment and connection and our whole history. And yet there is this real fear of coming back in and finding connection inwardly. It's not straightforward. And the body is not always feels like a safe ground initially, So it's sort of gently back into the body, and the body being holy ground, sacred ground of our history and everything that's ever happened to us. So yeah, I really feel that, that sacred bond with self, that relearning, if we want to ask for what we want, we have to know what we want, which means we have to feel ourselves and feel the subtleties of our being. And if we want to set a boundary, we need to feel in our bones that we're worth protecting. And in order to feel worth protecting, we have to have a living, vibrant connection with ourselves. Because we value what we sort of pay attention to and inhabit. Yeah. So I really feel like the return journey from niceness starts with coming out of other and returning to ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, that's lovely. I have a little bit of the goosebumps hearing that. I love that. It's like you say, this honoring of the self, this making the home in the self, this validating our thoughts and feelings. And I work with this a lot as well. I work with the concept of sovereignty. I think we're working in quite a similar space, really. And I love how you see the yin, that connection with the self is the source to accessing that yang, that like, no, I don't want this, move away, or yes, bring this towards me. And at the end of the chat, I'd love to ask you if you have an embodied posture we could try to do that. There's a great question here about how can we move away from pleasing others without all of the drama? So this is interesting, what can happen for people when you start showing up for yourself more and setting limits and boundaries, knowing more what you want. People aren't used to that around you. And, you might not be such a people pleaser anymore. Do you want to say something about that, Erika?
Yeah, I really would. Yeah, so I think, the second part of that sentence I can see is I lost a few relationships once I started being more myself. And it goes back to what Adam was saying about like belonging. Like, can we find that belonging to ourselves? That's the primary relationship. Yeah, that's, you are your own witness your entire life. That is you. And if you can belong deeply to yourself, it allows other relationships to be free of that need of belonging. Yeah. And some people, you will lose some relationships, and maybe that's okay. Like, maybe those weren't the best relationships for you, and you weren't, if you're not able to be authentically yourself in them, like maybe that wasn't the healthiest ground for you, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe those people are free to find another connection that more serves them, and maybe you are free to find the people that really will accept you just as you are. So I don't think, like, because relationships are so important to people that have learned to find safety through belonging to others, it feels like the end of the world when relationships end or move on. And maybe it's not. Maybe you're just all a bit more free to find the right people. And also, I just say, like, of course, people are invested in us being the way that we are. We don't see each other fresh each time we meet. We see like the version of each other that we think we've put you into a box. You're, Erika shaped, or this is Adam shaped. And so we don't meet fresh each time anyway. And so of course, when you start to change, people are invested in you not changing, particularly if you've served like a really helpful function of being someone that will always pick up the phone or do serve others, you know? And so we just learn to expect that pushback, and like for that not to be a disaster, you know, I think it's like when there's a wobble in a relationship, if we can learn to center around that, move through it, like it's okay, like it will be okay, you know. It's maybe that's not, there doesn't need to be such drama.
It's almost like a rite of passage. I think it means you're on the right track. If you're no longer happy with every single person in your life, if you start deciding, actually, I don't really want to hang out with these people, I want to hang out more with those people, if you're actually, it's a sign that you're evolving and changing, and not everyone can keep up with you.
And that doesn't have to be harsh. Like, I think as nice women, like if you think there's a spectrum, nice people, sorry, there's a spectrum. Like, you know, a highly dominant, assertive, aggressive kind of over here, and then there's nice over here. Yeah. Sometimes we can take a step in the direction of being more assertive, but it feels to our being like we've made this huge leap and we're suddenly a tyrant, you know? And actually we've just sort of said, no, I don't want to come to that dinner. God, you know? And actually, it doesn't have to be harsh. Though setting boundaries can be a really loving thing, you know? Like, really, it's like, that's kindness. Yeah, that's the distinction, niceness and kindness. It can be a really loving, kind thing to do. It doesn't have to be, it feels really aggressive in us maybe, but it's not. It can be really loving.
Yes, we need to practice a lot, I think, because otherwise sometimes it does come out as no, go away, when actually it can just be a very simple and loving no, and it's kind for that person who's not going to be with you all evening when you're feeling awful and you don't really want to be there, right? Or it's respectful to them. So there's a lovely piece on reframing the no that makes it lovely. And one of the big things is, I think, when we're able to say no to things that we don't like, it's a big yes to ourselves. It's a big part of that self-honoring and that becoming piece of your website's something called yourrighttobe.com. It's like your right to be, your right to say no, your right to say yes to what you want. And I think this could be an interesting point, Erika, to talk about going too far the other way, because that was a comment that someone made. I'm not sure if you read that they've overcome niceness and now they're afraid they've gone too far the other way.
Well, I did see that comment and I was thinking, I'd love to know a bit more. This is a fear that comes up a lot, like if I'm no, it's again it's that kind of misunderstanding, or the not of between niceness and kindness, I think. And also like that we can be powerful and loving. That I think we can also do this thing where powerful means tyrannical, oppressive, aggressive, and nice is kind and soft and obliging. And so there's I would be really curious to talk to that person and actually whether they have gone too far, because it's a fear that most women I work with come with. Like, if I'm not nice, I'm suddenly going to be a monster. And I often say, okay, how about we just practice? And if you start being a monster, we can work on that. And it's never happened. It's like, I think that's just the fear, the deep fear of like, if I'm not nice, then I must be this other monstrous kind of thing. And actually, I think we're more dangerous and we're more inclined to harm and more inclined to lash out and inflict punishment when we're not working on being less nice. It's like when we're stuck in niceness, when we're stuck people pleasing and obliging and feeling like we have no choice, when we don't have options, it's like circles of violence, right? It's like we let people take and we let people take and we let people take. And it's like the rage is building up, the resentment is building up, we're passive aggressive, there's anger, but because we're not ever been allowed or taught how to access that and use it skillfully, because we're not allowed to allow that even into our idea of who we are, it comes out and it will inflict harm, it will take revenge, it will certainly, I'll admit that I've been my most sort of dangerous in a way when I haven't been in contact with those places in myself.
Me too. And beware of the nice people, guys. That's who you have to watch out for. Those are the real nasty ones.
Beware of the people that say, I could never possibly do that. I would never hurt someone. I'm like, actually, I'm much less intimidated or worried when someone's like, no, I could inflict harm. I know that I'm capable of that. I know that I have that capacity. It's
relaxing to be with someone like that, but yet it's culturally not very cool. And especially in the more spiritual communities, there's this idea that anger and power is bad. And I think I don't like hanging out with that crowd so much anymore.
Well, I think there's like a denial of it. It's like these are all human aspects, like we all share them. And there's something about coming into contact with them and owning them and then putting them into use. It's like, so I know that I've got this like wrathful deity or like this wrathful part of me that can, and it's like, okay, and now that part comes out and can assert my boundaries, but kindly and much sooner than like being held back all the time, not speaking up, not being contained, and then it will pop at some point, and I don't have hold of it. It's like a wild animal, whereas actually bringing it into a conscious awareness means those energies can be put to good use, can be used to kind of take up space about something I care about, or can be used to assert something that I really want to do for the benefit, for the good,
I love how Brené Brown says that the most compassionate people are the ones that they're really good at boundaries, because they know their limits, they know what they're willing to do and what they're not willing to do. I really love that. Erika, I've just had a slight side thought, which is around female archetypes and how they're being portrayed now in certain films. And I want to talk about two in particular. So there's, I don't know if you saw any of the Lord of the Rings films.
Yes, I did.
And there was the Lady Galadriel, the kind of queen of the elves, and she's talking to everyone about the rings of power. And I think Frodo or someone talks about maybe keeping the ring. Someone talks about keeping the ring. And then you see her turn from this angel of light who people are a bit afraid of because she can see into their souls. She can completely see them, right? And she turns from that into this wrathful demon, and she's in her power. And I think the line is something like, and all will fear me and love me and weep. Which is like, wow, that's some strong female energy right there. And then you have some more modern female archetypes happening in a lot of films, like where the female archetypes, like Superwoman, for example, she more takes on men in men's own terms, like strength and power and that kind of thing. I'm curious, what do you make of that? Do you think this is a good thing, this direction for women and niceness and empowerment and being together?
God, I don't know. I'd have to think probably for longer. I'm a bit, sometimes it takes a while to percolate for me to really think that through. Gosh, I mean, it's that they are probably better than the Disney things that we grew up watching. My God, talk about some screwed up ideas of femininity that were in Disney. I think more interested in women being portrayed, or us all being portrayed in complexity. Like, I'm just, and I think two things. I think people are now incredibly fed up of superficiality. I'm really anti-superficiality. I think people are looking for depth of connection, depth of meaning, and well, some people are. The people that I'm interested in being with are. And there's something as well, and more I'm interested in nuance and complexity and how we hold contradiction. So in a way, the example of in Lord of the Rings, it's like we inhabit all of those spheres, a bit like we were just saying, like there's the shadow aspects, there's the, we're multitudinal. And I think with what happens with niceness is we're not allowed to embody or inhabit like half of what we are. We're taught, we have to, lots of women I work with talk about niceness as like a corset or a prison or someone said, God, it's like a full body cast, which is 2 sizes too small for me, which I have to sort of squeeze myself into, So we have this huge range, we have this huge complexity in us. And yet what we're allowed to embody, who we're allowed to be, is so narrow and small. And when we try to move out of that, there are all these structures in place that feed back to us that that's not okay. So I think more in films and more in what I'm interested in is real women being portrayed in the complexity that we are, like good and bad, like and the dark feminine. There's a lot of talk about the sort of unhealthy, what do they call it, toxic masculinity. I really dislike the term toxic, but there's not yet much talk about the equivalent in women, and there is a dark feminine, there's a dark feminine which we don't want to own, So I think there's something about if you don't see it, you can't be it, all of that. You need women to be showing different aspects of the complex that we are. So yeah, in some ways it's good. And in other ways, they're still super limited. If it's Wonder Woman or not, that's still one dimension. And of course, that's great to see. And we're so much more complex than that.
Yeah, I love that. If there's any writers out there, let's see this more complexity and wonder of character. Let's flesh them up a bit more.
And that's happening. That's happening. We're seeing that in literature.
And let's talk briefly about the idea of taking up space, because this is a really interesting one. Women are traditionally taught not to take up so much space, and now men, and there's this idea that some people should get out the way so that other people can have more space. And that's a bit controversial, I think, that idea. What are your thoughts on that?
Again, I think that comes really back to the complexity of the dynamics that we're all in. We're all, and it is about, access, or the feeling of entitlement to space is related to ideas of privilege and oppression and, yeah. So I guess, yeah.
Well, I think for me, I love the Marianne Williamson poem, which is like, don't hide your light because you're afraid that someone's going to be resentful of you. We're all born to shine as children do and bring our love into the world, and that encourages others to shine. So for me, a part of it is, if everyone gets out the way and you're there and you're still not feeling your ability to shine, I don't think your ability to shine is limited by other people shining. So for me, when people say that, I feel it's quite against this idea of your right to be or your sovereignty. I feel it's a direct attack on people's sovereignty, actually. So I'm not a fan of that. I'm a real fan of supporting people to come into their power, their center, their space, and to shine, to be in touch with it and to just shine it.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, gosh, it is that koan that I went back to really at the start, which is like societal kind of sorry, get distracted by the chat. The societal thing of like, we can't change, like we're all products and influenced by society, culture, interpersonal dynamics, the hierarchies that we are born into and fit into, we're shaped by. And those hierarchies and society are shaped by us as individuals. And so there is like this meeting ground of those two, so the opposite to man spreading is woman minimizing. Absolutely, we can, as women, begin to unminimize. Yeah, we can learn how we keep ourselves safe by keeping ourselves small, which is a historical, embodied, learned coping strategy or defense or safety mechanism. Same with other historically oppressed groups. And at the same time, in other settings, there'll be someone moving it out of my way or smallifying, and I will be, it's like we don't notice the people that move out of our
But is that your responsibility?
Which one?
That if someone moves out of your way, what's then the solution for you to make yourself smaller or less imposing? I mean, I think there's elements of that, but what do you think about this?
Well, I think there's a middle ground of just coming into our own awareness of where we feel we are, where we feel we are able to take up space, where that feels easy, and recognizing that might not be for other people. And so I think, and whether that's that I should then shrink or I should move away, I'm not sure. I think that, but having an awareness of it, having awareness of how I'm influencing a space or how other people are responding to me. We're co-conditioning, each of us are co-conditioning how the other person is able to show up or not able to show up. Whether it's I really value when someone who is more able and confident to take up space is aware that I'm not, or is aware of the dynamic that's in play. Yes. That means they then shrink, or is it that they support me to come up a bit more? It's like we are in this also together.
It's great to embrace the complexity of this.
Yeah, and we can take responsibility for our own smallifying. So I also hear what you're saying is like we don't have to do that. We don't have to smallify. We can unlearn that pattern and begin to take up space. And what we'll notice when we do that is other people will have a response. So I heard a Black woman speaking about this, saying when she came into her dignity, when she found dignity in her body, other people's response to that was to feel threatened, And so just noticing like, then we start to co-create differently in responses around us. Now that's not her fault, and in a way she had to learn to be okay with other people feeling insecure around her and not caretaking that, not shrinking again. Yeah.
Great.
It's noticing like the impact we're all having all the time. Yeah.
I love the image of the crown. I love the crowned queen and the crowned king. So when you put it on, I've actually got one here that I use it for my workshops. So if you go on here, pop it on, and immediately the spine goes up and the chest opens and the heart is more present. So what I like about this coming into one's own power is you're still connected to the world, you're sensing and responding to the world. Because on the other hand, you've got the sort of psychopathic Donald Trump, like, I'll do what I want, screw you guys. And on the other end, you've got I'm so worried about what everyone else is thinking and doing the whole time. And we have to come to the middle and to find ourselves really firmly rooted in this right to be in this presence. And sometimes we have to be okay if other people are feeling uncomfortable. And when we're really here and really present, I think that's when we can actually really support other people to take their own space and notice and encourage them.
Well, we become much less needy as well, right? We become let's not I think, that the caretaking, that the sort of serving others is kind and about others. No, it's deeply rooted in ourselves. There's a self-consciousness, there's a expectancy on the other person. There's it's not giving freely, it's giving with all these conditions attached that we might not be aware of. They're certainly not aware of. It's a very there's a big self in when we're doing that. And I think what you're talking about is this actually when we are able to come back to ourselves, when we're able to meet our own needs, when we're able to come into a sense of our own capacity and our own ability to actually, power, we talk about power, and again, that's another word but power is, if you think of power as the capacity to bring about change or the capacity to meet one's own potential. Yeah. It's like when we take ownership of it, it's almost like right responsibility. Like I've been trying out here with wrong responsibility to get my needs met here. I take responsibility for them myself more directly, and it liberates other people, right? It liberates. Then I can be genuinely concerned about you or interested in you, or I can want something for you that actually means that I get less of your attention, or it liberates you from needing to serve me in a particular way, which I'm getting in this odd, so it's just very complicated when we're in that dynamic. So I think you're right, when we're here in that sort of in our own sovereignty, suddenly we have wider perspective, we have a bigger vision, we're less reliant on other people. They are more free, we are freer, and also our perspective on the world changes. Like we can see beauty much more, we can fill up on kind of primary satisfaction, like those subtle things that are just really delicious and yummy and sort of soul food. We need all these things out in the world, and actually we just need to be comfortable sitting in our own being and appreciating what's right in front of us, Anyway, yeah, I totally agree, and let that be the kind of lesson of today, is to get in touch with our own feelings and needs, and get in touch with that a bit more. It's been great talking to you, Erika, and I wonder if you could demonstrate for us an embodied posture in a moment for everyone that they can do to help overcome being nice. And just before then, I wonder, what's your number one tip for staying connected to the world in an authentic, juicy way? Yeah, I think coming back, just really simple, like if you find yourself out in people pleasing, if you find yourself out lost in whether that's Facebook or a partner or doing too many things, literally step back and think, like coming out of other and back to self. Just really, like I'm an embodiment teacher, and it's like we work with the mind, working with the body. So just really taking that step back, and you can put a hand on the, like coming back to here. And that is probably the simplest kind of first step in untangling the tangle, you know, like, okay. And there might be then a little bit more room to have freedom in choosing your response. Yeah. Simplest thing. Yeah.
It's lovely. Step back to yourself. Thank you. And did you want to share, you have an event coming up? Do you want to share that in the chat before we do the pose?
How do I do that? Let me have a look. I don't think I can. Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can post it.
And you can also find links to Erika's work where you're seeing this video, yourrite2be.com. Is the workshop on there?
It is. So just go there because I can't work out the tech. So if you go to yourrite2be.com/events, there I've got an event coming up which is Pay by the Heart, which is just pay what you can afford this Sunday, which is all about this, returning to self, like coming back to the self. And that's sort of a taster of a 4-week course that I'm leading, which is really, I feel kind of evangelical about this now, right? Returning to self as the foundation of what Adam was talking about, that coming up into sovereignty, like coming back to the soil and the seed from which we grow into a strong tree.
I have the goosebumps again when you start talking about nature like that. I feel connected to the land.
Mimicry is what it's called, apparently, when you do that.
Yeah, I love it. It's getting the soil and the sea. Erika, would you show us this embodiment posture, please?
I would love to. So this is really a hybrid posture from embodied yoga principles and Dylan Newcomb's Uzazu, and a bit of my own soulfulness in it. Okay, let's see. I'm in a tiny cottage. Can't take up much space. That's a whole other conversation, how the environment affects it. But okay. So once you've done this, you know, you're out in other, maybe you're people pleasing, you've lost yourself out here, and you've taken this step back, and then this is where my course, this is the area of this, then coming into connection with self. And then from this place, feeling the connection with the earth, feeling power, you know, big thighs. I've got big thighs anyway. Big thighs, power through the thighs, and sort of pushing up, coming up, like Adam talked so beautifully about earlier, like elongation of the spine. You can imagine even the crown on your head, yeah? So coming up, and you're still back in self. So you're still, this is not about anyone else. You're still back in yourself. So this is the tree growing strong, yeah? Coming out of the seed, up into the tree. And then taking the arms up above the head, but with the palms facing back towards you. So this isn't like ta-da, it's not like out towards other. This is almost like you. This is you in your power and your strength. And this is you witnessing you like that. And it's also just witnessing you in the full complexity that I talked about, yeah? So just as you are, shadow, light, everything in between, failures, triumphs, this is your right to be, just as you are. And I like to imagine the hands as like benevolent mirrors, just like shining back at you, your belonging to yourself and to the world. So just marinating in that. Here I am, witnessing myself, good enough, just as I am. This is my right to be.
That's great, Erika. How long do you think we should do that for?
Oh, I would say, 2 minutes would be enough to begin marinating. You could do it, you know, the longer that you do it, the more effect it would have. But really, it's a sequence. So we have these sort of static postures, but also there's a sequence. So if you can come back, check in, grow tall, witness yourself in that.
I love it. It's not demanding outwards. It's like you say, marinating in the own power. It's wonderful posture. I really enjoyed that.
And then from there, you know, this is almost phase one. That's like archetypally phase one, in my opinion, of the niceness work. And then from there, then we turn outwards. And then it becomes about, how can I from this place say no? How can I from this place ask for what I want, you know, with this fuller sense of myself. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thanks so much, Erika. And the headlines from today are: beware of nice people, and come back to yourself. Come back to yourself. So thanks very much. And Nora's put the link in the chat there for your event, which is great. And thanks everyone for watching. And next week, we are meeting with Jason Diggs from Authentic Relating, and we have an evening event with him as well, which is free to join. So you're welcome to come to that, everyone. Thanks again, Erika Chalkey from Your Right to Be, Overcoming Niceness. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.